Anybody not like it? I probably shouldn't ask that,
No,
should I?
don't ask that.
Okay, all right. Is anybody to the point where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have been in the wrong profession? Oh, okay, so nobody, that's good.
That's good.
Because now it's late, but that's okay. You don't want to do something that you're not comfortable doing. All right, so did we read our TPA and the rubric?
Yes.
Okay, do we have questions on task 1? Oh, yes. Okay.
For the bullet point, is it more like phrases or do you want complete sentences?
No, for the chart,
Yes.
it's just phrases. Some of it might just say,
Like 14
60
students? Like exactly?
yes, 14 students, 5 male and 9 female. Or it might just say 57% free and reduced lunch, or, whatever. But in the narrative, then that's when you're going to do real sentences and paragraphs and all that. So we're good with task 1. So should I ask how many have completed task 1? Have you started?
Yeah.
Oh, good, okay, all right, good, that's a good thing. Keep it going. All right, so let's jump to task 2. So, and let me just kind of give some general type things. So you're going to be teaching a unit, and your unit is the TPA, I think, says anywhere from 5 to 10. We say, do we say 5 to 10 too? Okay, maybe the TPA says 3 to 5.
I think it does.
But you have
Yes.
to do what we have here. So 5 to 10 day lesson, our unit, and like I said on whatever day that was last Monday, Monday, you need to think of what your unit is going to be about, and you need to think of what standards it's going to cover, and so you'll be looking for those. And then you need to decide what is it that you want your students to learn. And then you're going to give them a pretest. So you're going to write a pretest that is appropriate for your grade level. And your post-test is going to be identical to that. But let's go back to pretest. So, whatever you decide you're going to teach, you've got the standards, you write the pretest. If I were you, I would put, and you don't have to do it on the copy that you give the students if you think that's going to confuse them, but somewhere I would make a note of which standard goal that question addresses, because it's going to come in very handy at the end. Okay? So as you're preparing your unit, you're going to look at the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Skills. That's what they're called now. So you're going to look at those, and you're going to pick out the ones that address your your unit. Now, you need to then write goals, and those are attainable, hopefully attainable goals, or measurable goals from those standards. So if, the standards usually are very wordy and there's lots of things covered in them, so you might be able to write 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 goals just from one standard. But you're going to write goals that you want to use in your unit. Okay, they need to be measurable, like the student will be able to. Okay, understand is not a measurable goal, so keep those things in mind. Now, what we say in the TPA is that you have to have at least 3 goals. So I'm going to be honest with you, since you're elementary, you're probably going to have a lot more, because you're going to have standards. That's what you're going to pull from the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Skills. That's your standard. And then you're going to have goals that you're going to write, the student will be able to, from those standards. Okay? So when you think whatever your unit's going to be, you may look at the West Virginia standards and say, okay, I'm using 6 standards. Well, you're gonna have to write at least one goal per standard. But you have to have a total of at least 3. Now, if you have 6 standards and 1 goal, that's more than 3. But if you only have 1 standard, which I can't imagine, but if you only have 1 standard that's going to cover your entire unit, you're going to have to write at least 3 goals from that standard. Now, are you clear? Are you all with me? So you've got to have at least 3 goals. You'll probably have more. But be careful how many more you have. Okay, we've had students who've had 20 before. And that's fine. But when you start keeping track and having to do your pre-test, post-test, and then do the charts and everything, that's a lot. Okay? So I don't want to tell you not to use a goal because it goes with your lesson, but just don't get carried away, because I know and I know most of you, so I know there are some of you that'll say, oh, more's better. Sometimes, but maybe not this time. Okay? It's okay if you have 20, but just know up front that 20 is a lot. So you have to have at least 3. So I guess I could say you have to have at least 1 West Virginia standard and at least 3 goals. So if you have 3 West Virginia standards and 1 goal per each, that's a total of at least 3 goals, and you just have more than 1 standard. Okay? So is that clear? Good. Okay. So you're going to have those goals, and I'm going to back up just for a minute because I wanted to get that clear. So in our lesson plan that we use now, we don't do big ideas. However, the West Virginia TPA does have you write a big idea. So that is just an overarching statement about your unit. Listen very carefully. It is not the students will be able to. Okay? That is not the big idea. The big idea is maybe 1 or 2 sentences that give the overarching theme of your unit. Okay, it is not a goal, it is not a standard, and it's not written that way. Okay. And then you're going to, so that's the big idea, then you're going to have your standards, or probably standards, and then you're going to write your learning goals from those. And then if you want to go to the chart, the chart that they're going to complete on this. You're going to put in the chart.
You want the learning goals?
Yes. Oh no, I want the template, the chart template that's in their template when they're going to fill
okay.
it.
I got you. That's the table.
Yes. So this is the template that's in your TPA that you're going to be filling out. So you're going to put the big idea, you're going to put your standards, and then you're going to put the learning goals that match the standard, okay? And then on this last column here, you're going to identify the level of that goal, like Bloom's taxonomy. So there, you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of factual, okay? Lower level, hopefully there's a mixture there for you. So that's what you're going to do, and that is pretty much it, other than there is a 4th part, but it's in the narrative, and it talks about anticipated student challenges. So what challenges do you anticipate from teaching your lesson with the students that you have in your class? So if you have, I always forget I'm recorded, so I've got to watch my examples I use. But I was going to say, we don't have any boys in here, right? So we'll say, all right, if your entire classroom, if you have 25, if you have 25 boys.
That's a
man.
man.
If you have 25 males in your classroom, and you know that maybe their reading level, they're all at least a grade level below where they should be as far as reading goes, then you might have some anticipated challenges because your unit involves lots of reading and maybe you're going to be reading some little bit of Shakespeare or something. So, that's hard enough for an adult to read or a high schooler, much less a kindergartner. I shouldn't say kindergarten, but we'll say fifth grader, okay? So these are just anticipated challenges that you think you might face while teaching your unit based on your contextual factors. Maybe it's the community. There's something going on in the community that is, playing over in your classroom or something like that, and I don't know. Okay, so based on your contextual factors, what are some anticipated challenges that you might have? And that's where you're going to put that there. And that's task 2. So, questions about task 2?
I already had somebody ask this. The
Okay.
unit plan, I don't think is uploaded into the TPA, which is fine. So I will email that if it's not. Somebody said they couldn't find,
The unit plan's in the TPA.
that's what I thought, but,
Oh.
okay. So it is within the TPA?
Yeah.
Okay, then, never mind.
Maybe
It was no one in this room, so,
Maybe they were looking at this
Yeah.
piece that I'm going
there we go.
over.
Okay,
Task
so
4.
it is built into task 4. Okay, that way I can remember that.
Okay.
Scared me.
Sorry.
Yeah, it kind of scared me.
I didn't mean to.
All right, so task 3. Task 3 is your assessment plan. So this is where your pre and post come into play. Now, what you're going to do, you have a template or a chart in task 3 as well. What you're going to do is you're going to copy and paste your learning goals from task 2 that we just did. The learning goals, not the standards, the learning goals. So there has to be at least 3 of them, but there could be ever how many. You're going to copy and paste them here. I think are there only 3 here? How many did you put there?
I think 4.
Okay, so there are 4. So when you're saying, oh gosh, I have 10, I need to add 6 more. All you need to do is copy and paste, or if that becomes an issue and you can't get it, you can contact Dr. Watson and he can help you expand this chart, okay? But just copying and pasting those down there should work. So you're going to list all of your learning goals. And then for each learning goal, you're going to tell us what questions specifically match from the pretest. Remember when I said when you're writing your pretest, you should probably put, even if you just put learning goal number 1 or LG1, LG2 on your pretest, whether it's the copy you give them or not, just so when you get to this, it'll be a little bit easier. And you've already done that, okay? So you're going to tell which questions from the pretest go along with learning goal 1 over there. As an evaluator, we would really appreciate you writing out the question unless it's a paragraph long. Because when you put questions 1, 2, 6, and 8, then we have to go back and find it and find 1, 2, 6, and 8. And so it's easier if they're listed here. But if they're too wordy or it's just too much, it's fine. The same thing for the post assessment. So these 2 right here should be identical because your pre and your post are going to be the same. For what we're doing, they're going to be identical. So these should be the same unless maybe you renumbered them. Okay, so you might put them in some different order so the students don't think that they look the same. So then that's the only thing that would be different, but the question part's going to be the same. For your formative assessment, those are things that you're doing within your unit that are formative assessment pieces that match that standard. So maybe you're doing a some kind of bulletin board project, or the students have to do a poster board, or maybe they have to make something, or I hate the word worksheet, but maybe you gave them 25 worksheets to do and they match learning goal number 1. Just hope I'm not your evaluator. I'm kidding. But any formative assessment, which means you're using it formatively, goes right there. You list it. Okay? The last column says level of mastery. This always becomes an issue with everybody. Not that it's marked wrong, but when we start thinking about it. So what I need you to do right now, before you say anything, is think, what do I consider to be mastery? What is mastery in your brain? Does everybody have an idea? So just, what do you consider to be mastery?
70%.
70%?
80 to 85.
80 to 85%? Okay. It's whatever you consider to be mastery. How do I say that? I mean, you really need to give it some thought, but chances are 50% is not mastery. Okay? But mastery means mastery, period. If you say that word over and over, that sounds funny. It does. Have you ever said a word and you say it over and over and you're like, oh, that just, mastery is one of those. I'm sorry, I don't know. I guess because I'm saying it so much. Okay, so anyway, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you consider mastery to be 80%, then regardless of what the assignment is, that's mastery. So I'm just going to pick 80. 80% mastery on the pre-test is the same as 80% mastery on the post-test. So if you consider 80% to be mastery, then that's across the board. Now, do you expect your students to get an 80% on the pre-test? No. And if you did, then you probably should rewrite your pre-test. Because you're going to give that pre-test. And remember I mentioned the other day, if they get an 80%, if the whole class as a whole gets an 80%, then they've already mastered that concept. So I would almost say you're either going to have to scratch it and pick something else, or you're going to have to go in much more depth that you weren't even thinking of going. So this is not anticipated score. This is mastery. So if 80% mastery is what you think, then you're going, I mean, there's going to be a little adjustments, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. But that's what you're going to have here. So let's say that everybody in here says 80% is what I think mastery is. So you have 4 questions. What's mastery? All 4. 80% is mastery for you. 3 is 75%, right? So they're going to have to get all 4 in order to get the 80%. If you only have 1 question, what's mastery? 1 out of 1, okay? It's going to be 100% on this particular one. So you're going to see some different numbers, and sometimes you're going to have to make a little judgment call. You're thinking, oh gosh, 3 out of 4 is so close, but I really consider mastery to be 50%, so it's got to be 4 out of 4. You know, that happens with 1 and 2 questions too. So it'd be nice if everything had maybe 10 questions and you think, okay, 8 out of 10, that I feel good about that. But then that means you're going to have 10 questions on your pre and your post for every single learning goal. And that you're not going to do that. I mean, you don't want to have a 100-point pre-test. Okay?
Dr. Lucas?
Yes.
Can they have different levels of mastery for each learning goal?
Well, it goes back to what mastery is. I mean, still, I guess we can make an argument, but why would you think mastery is 80%, but then this particular learning goal, I'm gonna say, no, it's only 50%? It might be harder, but mastery's mastery.
I was just asking because we always get that question.
So that whole column is going to be, if you think it's 80%, you're gonna put 80% in every box.
Well, 80% might not be possible, because if you have 3 questions,
Oh, okay.
and so it's gonna have to be 3 out of 3,
Gotcha.
100%.
Okay.
And you might, I mean, if
80 would be
nothing, I will get, if nothing on there works out perfectly to 80%, but that's what you're thinking, if it were me, I would probably put a little starred note at the bottom or the top and say, I consider mastery to be 80%, but some of these are adjusted because I can't get 80% with 3 questions. Yes.
I have several IEPs in my classroom, so for some kids, I think 80% will be mastered, but for those other kids with the IEP, do we still consider the 80% to be mastered for them as well?
I think it's probably going to depend on what the IEP says,
Okay.
because in some of those cases, probably not.
Right.
And so you might want to note that on certain things, especially when we get to a different chart, and you maybe can mark, this one has an IEP, and, the IEP says we just need to get 50% math, or something, So I would probably note that. Not necessarily on this one, but on another chart that we may or may not get to today.
I saw that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I was asking.
Okay, so, yeah, I'd mark it
Probably
on.
not for this one, but as far as like the master
Yeah.
level, I didn't know.
Yeah, I'd probably put it on that one and put some notes. Yeah.
If you have like your different standards, so like I'm doing science, math, and reading, and my reading is to look at text features and stuff, but my unit's over sound. Should I have like a section where they answer questions so they can tell, and then have another small section where they do measurement, because it relates in my unit, but it doesn't as individual?
This comes up every semester, and so I usually say, talk to your supervisor, because some of them will want it in there. And so what I say as an overall answer is, if it's part of your unit, then it goes in your pre and post, and you have the standards and all that. If it goes along with it, like for instance, there will be some of you maybe that, so you're doing something science related. Well, you're concentrating, let's just say you're concentrating on climate, period. So writing an essay doesn't necessarily relate to climate, but maybe at the very end, you're going to have them write an essay and you're going to grade it. So you kind of have to think, is that really, should I include the standards that talk about having a intro, body, and conclusion in a paragraph, and the grammar has to be there and all that? Because really, that would go with everybody. So I usually say focus on what pertains to your unit. Now, your supervisor may say, well, I want you to have at least one standard that is math related that deals with what you're doing. So if you're using it as a standard and it's a learning goal, yes, it needs to be on your pre and your post.
So if we have, like, let's say we have 10 questions, and we have 8 of them are science, and we have 1 math and 1 reading, does that change the level of mastery, because it would be 100% for those questions?
For me, it doesn't, because, if 80% is what I think is mastery, then the only way to get 80% is to get 1 out of 1. And that's what I was saying, even out of 3 out of 4. 75 is so close to 80%. But if I'm saying I only consider mastery to be 80 or above, then they're going to have to get 4 out of 4. So there's a little wiggle room, and when you get in your own classroom and, you're looking at all kinds of factors, you can adjust that. But for this, I would go ahead and put all. Yes?
So I also have a question out of both of these. With an IEP, like I have a student in my class, and actually 2 students, and they grade them on a sliding grade scale, so they don't get the same grade even if they get the same amount wrong. So, would I know that?
I would note that in there. When you get to the narrative section, I would note that. Just so the evaluator looking at it is going to know that going in.
And I also wanted to ask, because we're all elementary in here, do we need to include every subject, or like, is there a certain number of subjects?
That's what I said, and we'll talk about that on Monday because you're a little different. But for most of you, that is a question for your supervisors, because most supervisors will say, somewhere in the unit, I want every subject covered. Some will say, pick your main one, whatever that is, science, and then do one or two additional ones. So I can't make a blanket statement about that, but we'll talk about that for the three of you on Monday. Does that make sense? Are we good? So then, there's some narrative pieces here as well. Let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay. And I will tell you, and maybe I should have mentioned that here, but on the pre and the post and the formative, they use the words in the directions before, during, and after, so that might help you as well. That formative, is obviously during your instruction. Okay, so we're good? All right, so task 4. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
For like the formative, if we are having them do like some project-based assessments, do we include the rubrics in that section, or like just overall like?
You're going
attach
to
them?
include it, let me see, I forget where we have you put that. Yes, if you're doing, and I think, was there not a, where is the section? Scroll back up there and see what those headings are. Because there's a, scroll down to the next, the first narrative piece there. Okay, go on down. Oh, yes. Okay, so in task 3, for those of you that are doing projects, or you're giving worksheets, or you're giving an assignment and you don't have paper, there's places where it tells you to paste, copy and paste, whatever that is. If there are no directions on it, maybe, okay, I'll use a perfect example. When we used to do something similar to our Green and White Days, we had the parents and the students come in, those were prospective students, and we had this big, it looked like a gingerbread, we used to call it our gingerbread man, but it was really a person. So it was just a very loose shaped body figure with arms and legs and a head. And so what we would do is we would give it to the groups of people, we would tell them to, I remember you did this once, I think. We would tell them to put the characteristics in, or wherever they were placed in the body, to describe the perfect teacher. And so, you might have knowledge up here in the brain, or you might, some people drew a heart, and then, maybe they were caring or tenderhearted or whatever. But if you just look at that piece of paper, it's just a body figure. And so if I would give this to you without saying anything, you wouldn't have any idea what to do. So if that's part of my lesson, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that and put it here. And then it says somewhere, description of the material. So and then I think somewhere it says teacher directions and all that. But you would just describe maybe what you said to the students to get them to do whatever you need to do.
Talks about
Yeah, right
assessment.
here. Directions for teacher and student here, so you would do directions, or you could put the directions, with this in that piece up there, if or what the teacher said, what the students would say, etc. So yes, I forgot who asked me that question, but anyway, okay. So yes, if you are using materials, activity sheets or whatever that go with it, yes, put them all there in task 3 and put directions where they are. Now, if the directions are already on the sheet and you either say read the directions or you don't really tell them anything extra, then what you have there is fine. Yes?
Do you want it to be completed work or before, like?
We've had both. So a lot of times students like to do both. They'll put a blank one, especially for your pre and your post. You don't have to put a copy of your pre and your post necessarily, especially, you know, because they're the same. And you might just say on my post it looks the same, but I mix the numbers up. Some will give us a blank one and some will give us an answer one. And then sometimes we'll get a student copy, just so we can kind of see what they did. Anytime you use any student copies, make sure you black out the name, okay? And I'm just going to tell you up front, little side note, when you do your student teaching, capstone, thank you. When you do your student teaching capstone interview, thank you, interview is what I needed. Don't ever mention any student names. Okay. If you say Betty, just say, oh, that's what we call her, and, you know, it's a student name. Because that's a no-no. All right, so are we good with task 3 then? Okay, so back to task 4. This is your design for instruction. So this is your lesson plan for every single day of your unit. So your unit plan. Let's skip this for a second. Go down to the template for the unit plan. So the template is already here. Okay? I think there are 10 days.
Yes.
There are 10 days worth. You've got the unit, and then you've got 10 days worth of lesson plans. If your unit is 15 days, then you're going to need to add 5 days. Copy and paste. If it doesn't work, contact Dr. Watson, okay? If you only have 8 days and you want to delete 2 of them, just delete 2 days, all right?
Save your work before you try that.
Yes. Yes. And maybe you'll know if you're doing it on a Word document somewhere else, you'll know that it's 12 days and you need to add 2. So maybe even before you start putting it into the actual document, you go in and add your columns or your additional parts to your charts or whatever, just to make sure it works before you start putting stuff in. I was going to say something. Oh, about this. Make sure that you highlight. Okay, just like you're supposed to highlight in your on the lesson plan for the college vet, it's the exact one. Make sure you highlight. I will tell you that I've sent them back because they haven't been highlighted before. Don't make us guess, because we may guess incorrectly, what you thought was differentiated instruction or what you thought were materials or whatever, teaching strategies. Just make sure that you do the highlighting, and it reminds you there. Make sure that you fill out every block as much as you possibly can. If you leave the differentiated instruction blocks blank, then I'm going to assume that either you didn't do any differentiated instruction, you didn't know what it was, or I'm hoping you just kind of forgot to put it in. But still, that's going to be a 1, and you're going to have to redo. Okay? And you're going to be in a new placement by the time you would have to redo any of this, and then you're going to have to start thinking, okay, I've got to switch gears and go back to that last class I was in, and blah, blah, blah. Yes?
I have a class that is pretty much, there's one student that's not on level, but the rest of them are on level or above. So I can differentiate for the one tag student that I have, but what should I put in there if I'm not differentiating much, like they're all on the same level?
I would note that as well. I mean, there might still be a few little things that you're doing. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but I would note that just so the evaluator is aware. And it might be you're differentiating as a whole class.
Yeah.
Okay, so will you go back up to the beginning of task 4? So in task 4, you're also selecting your 2 focus students. And let me just reiterate and say, you can, unless somebody's telling you otherwise, we're telling you and I'm telling you, your focus students can be any 2 students you want them to be. They do not have to have an IEP. They do not need to be 2 separate genders. They do not need to be, I don't know, in the same or in different reading groups or whatever. They can be whoever you want them to be, but hopefully you've chosen them because there's something you want to, and I hate to use the word compare, but there's something you want to kind of compare between the two. So it might be a really rowdy boy and a really quiet, reserved young lady. And you might want to see how they do. It might be two rowdy boys, but maybe they're from different parts of the county. I don't know. But you need to have a reason for choosing them. A lot of students do like to choose the highest achieving student and the lowest achieving student in the classroom. Those are typical. But they don't have to have an IEP. You don't have to choose a special ed tagged student versus a non-special ed tagged student, special needs I should say. But don't just say, well, I just shut my eyes and wow, you two were it. Because then you don't know why am I comparing them? Okay? And a lot of times the examples that are used are from the tag students just to kind of show, because you are going to talk about them a little bit later, but they didn't have to be. So there's a template here where you're going to talk about the rationale for choosing the Focus Student 1 and Focus Student 2, and you're going to refer to them as Focus Student 1 and Focus Student 2. In the charts that we'll talk about next week, I think we meet Wednesday, and that will be whole group. I'll go through the rest of it, but you will refer to them. You'll see in the charts where it says Focus Student 1 and Focus Student 2. And then you're going to describe your differentiation between them or between them and the class. So how's task 4? Yes?
Is there a minimum time that you have to have for each lesson? 30 minutes or 2 hours? So
I would assume that's going to be based on the schedule of the classroom that you're in. Because you've got some flexibility as much as you can with the teacher in there, and you'll see flexibility when you have your own classroom. If you're doing this really exciting lesson and you need to extend it and then kind of catch up the next day. So as much as you have the flexibility with the teacher in the classroom, and I don't.
And when it said 3 to 5 daily lesson plans, that just means we're 5 to 10 that we
Yes,
have to write.
right, yeah. That was just because it's a state document, they just kind of did to cover what everybody does.
For the differentiation, if we're like specific students, can we use like student numbers, include number, or students?
Yes.
Like for students like 1, 2, and 3, you've
Yes.
done this.
So are we good with 1, 2, 3, and 4? Yes.
For our difference in instruction, I don't know if someone could ask this. If we have students' names and they're like saying this student does this, can we use like initials of that student's name?
I think we've used initials. Initials are fine.
Fine, okay.
Yeah. Just as long as you don't name them somewhere else.
That's
But yeah,
fine.
yeah.
And make sure like on the work that it's
Yes.
redacted, the
Okay.
names are redacted, yeah.
Okay.
And really, 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 when you do that interview, don't use names. And if you accidentally do it, but if you accidentally call, Amy, and you're saying, and you catch it, don't go, oh, just say, that's the name I'm using for that student right now.
Just play it off.
Yeah, play it off, it'll be fine.
Also happens to be on their birth certificate.
Yeah. That's just what I'm calling them.
But, because, that there are, and I know, it's hard. It's hard for me not to use your names, and I don't put your names in anything, but because I know you, it's just hard to try to describe you without saying, well, you know who I'm talking about. So just kind of cover it. Well, that's what I'm using for this. And then that way maybe you won't forget what name you used because you're using the real one. Don't tell them I told you that. Yes.
Okay, on the highlighting section, like the teaching strategies or whatever, do you want to highlight it every single time we do that strategy, or just the first time it comes up?
I would highlight it every single time.
Okay.
But I think there are some evaluators that like to see it highlighted every time, and some that say, well, just do it, but let's just do it every time. Yes.
Okay, so kind of going back to differentiated instruction, like I'm kind of in the same situation that there's some of my classes, or a couple subjects that we actually switch out students, like our high level students with lower level students from another class. So they're all really on the same level. So could we just put like this is an activity that helps tactile kinesthetic students?
Yeah.
Something like that would still be fun.
Yeah, and then in the narrative part, I would elaborate on those issues where you've got some, switching around and really they're all on the same level. At least, I mean, you'll get arguments from people who will say, even if you're all scoring a 100 on the test, you're still at different levels, just barely, but still. Yeah, I would just elaborate in the narrative sections. And if you think it's something that may be overlooked or it's kind of in the middle, underline it, highlight it, something bold, just so the evaluator sees it. But when they read it all, but you're just trying to emphasize that. So are we good with 1, 2, 3, and 4? Yes.
What was that website again for task one that had all the, do you have?
It's the West Virginia Department
Yeah,
of
wvde.us. And then you go to the bottom of the page and you'll see the link to it. It's the easiest way to do it. Do not use the demographics in live text. They're like 5 years old. So they're not accurate. Yeah.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
We put them in when we first got live text and they've never been updated. So.
Oh, well, there
Oh,
you
in that, gotcha.
Okay.
We should probably see if they'll take those in.
I probably could take it. You're just making it work.
I'm good for that.
Some of us have to work. All of us should have to.
There's only like 400 schools.
Can't you just do one? No, okay. All right. Okay, so are we good on 1, 2, 3, and 4? Okay, I just want to mention a couple of things about 5, just because, and I'll probably start with 5 on Wednesday, and I'll do 6 and 7. But I just want to tell you a few things about 5, just so you're kind of thinking ahead. 5 is the implementation and reflection on your daily teaching and all of that. So this is where you're going to be videotaping. All right? And the chart that Dr. Watson has up on the screen right now is your reflection. Now, in parts of the TPA, it mentions this reflection in task 4, and in some parts it mentions it in task 5. And that was the way it was written at the state. We put it here because I'm a big advocate of why would you put it at the end of your lesson plan when your lesson plans are supposed to be done when related to your teaching? Before. So how can you reflect without having to go back? So I like it separate. So anyway, it's in task 5. So you're going to reflect every day, what went well, what didn't, maybe the flu got your class and, half of them were out because that's going around, and so you all stay healthy, wash your hands over and over and over, use hand sanitizer, vitamin C, lots of rest. Okay, all right, mom's done here. So anyway, this is where you're going to be videotaping. So I'm going to encourage you to videotape more than less, and often, okay? You're not going to use it all, but you need to have things to pull from. Because if you say, today I know, I can just feel it. I look nice, I just feel great, my hair's the way I want it to be, my makeup looks great, today is going to be it. And so I'm videoing today, and that's it. Well, that's when the kid's going to come up and ask you a question and puke all over you. Or who knows what's going to happen. Something is going to happen, and you're not going to be able to use that video. And maybe it happens to be the last day of your unit because you thought, hey, I'm right on it today. And then I don't know what you're going to do. So I would suggest videoing maybe a good portion of every day of your unit. And then you can kind of pick and choose. In the directions for task 5, it gives you under number 3, 5 things that need to be included in the video.
Give me a second.
And they are organization, I think. There. Organize the classroom, delivery content, actively engage students, manage classroom behavior, and make adjustments or flexibility. So those are things we want to see. So now, the video can only be 15 minutes, period. At 15:01, we stop watching. So if you submit 22 minutes, 7 of them are not going to be viewed. And if your best stuff is in that last 7 minutes, we're not going to see it. Okay? 15 minutes and that's it. You can have as many clips as you want. If you really want to do 15 one-minute clips, you can. I wouldn't suggest it because you can't get much in 1 minute. But it doesn't have to be a full 15-minute block. So you can do 5 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 4 minutes here, and maybe you don't do any. I can't tell you how many TPAs I've evaluated, and you've got 15 minutes and I see 6. Maybe you can get everything you need for me to see or another evaluator to see in 6 minutes, but I don't know. If I've got 15 minutes, I'm going to use 15 minutes. But you don't have to, okay? Max is 15 though. And seriously, it will be cut off at 15. So if you include more, please don't make it your best stuff, okay? So one of these days I'm going to have this little part memorized so I say it the right way. What we say about those 15 minutes is what you don't want to do is start a lesson and the first 5 minutes are great. It's including everything you need. It's wonderful. And then you noticed that the next 3 minutes were really bad, and that's not, but you need that because you need to show something in that that's one of these 5 things. So tomorrow you're going to redo those 3 little minutes. You can't do that. Okay? So we joke and say that your videos shouldn't show change of clothes, but you can't splice it.
I'll stop you.
Okay, all right, because I always say they're always used the wrong words. You can't splice it and stick in the good stuff. Maybe that's all I can say. Yes.
I thought you said, like, what if we videotape multiple days?
And you can, but what you can't do is put it together as if it's like
A single day.
a single day's.
So could we like somehow do like day 1, like could we put like a, if you know how to do that, like use iMovie, like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Because like you
I
said,
know,
like
we
you don't
do.
want the last day, but like for my unit, a lot of this, like I want to do my teaching, but then like towards the end, it's a lot more student-centered, but like I'd also like to include that in there.
As long as you're not, I probably wouldn't put day 1, day 2, day 3. I probably wouldn't do that. But as long as you're not trying to sell it as though I'm starting teaching right now and I finished my 15 minutes or whatever right now, and I try to put it together as if,
Can I take a crack at it?
yeah.
Okay, so the second example of things you have to show is deliver content. What we're really concerned about is I'm teaching quadratic functions and I'm doing a great job, and then I put up a completely wrong formula and the class starts laughing and I fall apart. And so I stop it and then I put myself back in the exact same spot and hit the camera start again and continue on like nothing changed. We don't want that.
Right.
You know, if something falls apart, that actually is a good thing for us to see, because it shows us how you recover. But what, it's.
Unless you don't recover.
Well, yeah.
Unless you just.
And
keep
that's why you
going
do
on
multiple days.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about, I've got a great 5-minute, you know, this shows how I organized the class on this day, but my delivery of content is a different day, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's just, you know, if you're trying to con us into, I didn't make a mistake, which is typically what we see where we have problems. To answer your other question where you said put day 1 and day 2, do not put bells and whistles in your video. Don't put text script like directed by or starring. We don't want to see any of that. We just want to see video.
So, yeah, just don't try to put it all together like, you know, like he said, like it was one.
You got a question?
Okay, wait a second, she already started.
How do you, in the video, show that you're organizing the classroom?
Well, if I'm teaching and let's say I'm teaching polyhedra, okay? So I want to use it and I'm like, okay, wait just a minute. I really meant to have those. And so I have to go over here and I have to dig through the closet and find all that stuff that I should have already had here. Or I say, remember that paper I gave you 3 weeks ago? Can you all pull that out because today's really the day I need to use it. You know.
So pretty much being
Who knows?
prepared?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then you can, in the narrative part, you can say, you know, in the video, you can see where I had all the materials laid out and we went thing by thing by thing.
Okay.
Right. And it's okay if you know, I mean, if you forget, I mean, we all forget, you know, you needed scissors and you had everything but scissors and, you know, they're right there in the drawer, you just have to go, that's not a big deal. And we were talking about mistakes and we all make them. I mean, you've been in my class and, you know, I might say 2 + 2 is 5 but it's okay if a student corrects you and, oh, I don't know why I said that. You don't have to cover that up, that's fine. Unless you just say, no, 2 + 2 is 5 and be done with it and go on, then we have a problem.
So I'm pretty confused because you said we use clips, but we shouldn't splice the video. So I think that there's some more people confused in here, but maybe not. But, okay, so do you want clips of the best work, or do you want just like one clip of the day we felt best, or do you want like?
I want clips, and if you don't want to do a clip, if you want to do a 15-minute span, if it covers all 5 of those things, you don't have to do clips. But if you are teaching a 45-minute lesson, and the first 2 things are in the first 8 minutes of your lesson, and the next one is in the 20th minute, and the last 2 are in minutes, well, I don't know, what did I say, 30-minute class? Whatever, or 45 minutes, the last few minutes, then I'm not going to see it all. So there's no way, excuse me, that you can show me all of those in that 15-minute span because it's stretched out. So you're going to show me clips. You're going to show me the first 7 minutes where I see those 2, and you're going to show me the 15th minute where I see of your lesson, not 15 minutes of the clip, where I see something else. So what we're saying is, yes, you can do clips, and you're going to show as long as you show us those. What you can't do is say, okay, all of these are going to be in the first 15 minutes, like the example Dr. Watson used, and you're trying to, you know the first 2 minutes, or maybe you go home and watch it, and you come back and you're thinking, okay, they said something about, I'm going to pretend that I did this all on the same day. I'm going to wear the same clothes tomorrow. And so I'm going to say, now listen, guys, I really messed up on this piece. So I'm going to teach. And then I'm going to redo this exact thing I did yesterday because I told you all something wrong and I just don't want them to see that. And so then when I splice that, it makes it look like it's one full lesson, and that is not acceptable.
But you don't want to see like, we're going to teach it over multiple days. You don't want to see like different lessons on different days in this video.
Well,
We said you could do,
yeah, you can do different.
yes.
I mean, if you look at the questions, let me look at the questions, maybe that'll help. So when you're looking at the narrative piece to task 5, it talks about using the video clips, document your ability to effectively do the following: organize a classroom, deliver content. Typically, these first 3 things can be done in one segment of time. The organizing the classroom, delivering content, and actively engaging students. So that's probably a 5 to 6 minute clip. The thing you have to realize is 15 minutes isn't a lot of time. You know, you think that, oh, well, 15 minutes, I could do the Gettysburg Address and then some. But when
We've
you,
had 4 15-minute segments already in here.
yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised when you're trying to say, okay, what's the evidence? Well, it's a telemarketer, hello. It even says it's a telemarketer. You know, so one clip might do 2 or 3 of them at the same time. Okay, then 2 days later, I might have a really good clip of me doing D and E, and that's okay. It's hard to explain it without you seeing some of the examples we've seen where it's, you know, literally they're telling us it's the same lesson and it was so effective, and, you know, they walked behind the desk and came out with a completely different outfit on. And it's like, instead of just being honest and saying this was day 2 and this is another continuation, they tried to sell it as one lesson, and that's what we don't want. Honesty is the best policy.
So what you need to do is you need to make sure you show those 5 things within 15 minutes. And you have all of the room in the narrative to explain things that you feel like you need to explain to us.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm just like making sure, so we can video, so like if we wanted to video a little bit of each day, we could do that. But basically, we just can't go and redo something that we already did, pretty much, right?
Right, if you're going to try to stick that, yes. But
Yeah.
I would encourage you to video every day.
If we wanted to put like a little clip from each day, we could do that.
In
Yes,
theory.
as long as it covers what you're supposed to be covering.
And what she's trying to say is, videotape the
Yes.
whole week of lessons, because what you think, like she said, what you think might be a great day, you may find that wasn't so hot, the camera work wasn't so, but I really surprisingly had a really good day on Thursday, and boy, I'm thankful I taped that, because now I'm going to use that clip instead.
Because Johnny was standing in front of the camera the whole time you didn't see, picking his nose. And so we don't even see you, and that's the day you thought you were outstanding. And you can't use that now because he was standing in front of the camera and he blocked you, and,
Or
you
the
know, we
camera
can
fell
barely
over.
hear you.
Yeah, we've had the camera fall over.
Yes, and we've had sound not work, we've had it black out for who knows what reason. We can hear you, but we can't see you. So any number of things could happen. So if you only do it once, yeah.
For the actively engaged students' ability to use question strategies, is that like in whole group if you were asking them questions to get them engaged, or small group helping them?
Either one.
And then,
Now, be careful with small group, because unless you've got someone, you know, standing right behind you, we won't be able to hear what you're saying. Now, we can tell that you're engaged and they're engaged and all that. We can't really tell what you're saying, though. So,
did the LRC ever get running back again?
yes,
Yes.
it is up and running.
And they have video.
Yes, they do, and they will check those out.
Do you know, can you have for a whole week?
Yes. And I'm
First
looking
come,
at
first
Dr.
take,
Watson
though.
because he's kind of over it this semester.
Yeah, but it's first come, first serve.
Is it just for 1 week?
We would prefer it to be 1 week only because there's 40 of you. We only have like a dozen cameras.
Just if it was like my unit's going like a week and then 1 Monday, but that would be okay?
Yeah,
No problem.
Okay,
I mean, we're going to do whatever we can to help you.
okay.
yeah.
If
And
you walk
if
in
you,
and there's no cameras.
you know, if you have iPads or phones or whatever, and you want to use those, yes, just make sure that you can upload it to live text.
We don't upload our video just to our Word document, we just,
You cannot upload your
Right.
video to your Word document.
so we would just upload it with like 2 documents.
Yes, yes, and so while you're mentioning that, because there's a place to upload the video, and it will pop up when we see the screen, we'll have a little video there, and we, you know, just click it. And there are other ways to do it too, but then there will be the document. Also, those, and I think I mentioned this last week, I'm not sure, but your consent release forms. Do not put those in your TPA template, okay? Scan them and put them in a separate file, and then you're going to upload that file. So you're going to have at least 3 things you're going to upload. So don't put, because that's a page each, and if you have 25 students, you're adding 25 pages to this, and I don't know if I mentioned, but this, without any of you in it, is like 60-some pages.
Oh, it's more than that.
Mhm.
No, without them putting anything in it.
I still say it's more.
Okay. 62. Okay, so it's 62
Okay.
pages without you touching it.